Yesterday, we saw the pattern again. President Donald Trump extends a path to negotiation. And within hours, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei responds not with diplomacy, but with a threat. He acknowledged the power of American aircraft carriers, saying, "Of course, a warship is a dangerous piece of military hardware." Then he added, "More dangerous than that warship is the weapon that can send that warship to the bottom of the sea." This was not Khamenei rhetoric. This was a direct threat to American forces in the region. And then came the personal taunt against President Trump. Khamenei mocked President Trump's statements about the survival of the Islamic Republic, saying, "Oh, that's a good confession." And then he declared Trump will not be able to eliminate the regime. Now, here's the problem. Khamenei still doesn't understand Trump's handshake doctrine. Trump does not begin with war, he begins with a handshake. But the handshake, it's not a weakness, it is a test. If you accept it, you get a deal. If you mock it, you get pressure. If you threaten it, you're going to get the consequences. Iran has misread this before, and if Khamenei thinks that this is just a theoretical bluster, he may be surprised again. My guest today is Raphael Yosef, a senior fellow at the Herut Center, one of Israel's fastest rising stars in the conservative space. He's a military sniper with a lot of experience, and he's got the mind to understand the way the Middle East and the world work. My friend, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So this meeting, actually, this interview is really an outgrowth of a conversation you and I were having around a cup of coffee, really talking about what was going on between Trump and Iran, and specifically about those negotiations. But since then, Khamenei, Rafi, he's threatened the United States to send an aircraft carrier to the bottom of the sea, and he's literally poked President Trump. And, I'm curious, is he kind of just egging Trump on? Is this just like a show of force, or is he aware of the consequences?
Well, is he aware of the consequences is a question. I don't know if that's the right question to ask. The question is, what does he want to gain at the end of the day? Does he know what he's going to get in return? That depends on other things like, again, what does he see religiously or politically as the future or the end of Iran? Is this a man that has something to lose or nothing to lose?
Like he could be a suicide bomber, basically, in the head chair of Iran. I mean, do you think it's possible he's willing to bring Iran to the brink out of religious conviction?
Yeah, again, we need to remember that these things aren't rational decisions. These things aren't something that's one of the main problems we have as Westerners, is to assume that people from opposing civilizations share the same concepts of common sense, that religious virtue and apocalyptic visions are somehow rational. And so we want to imbue them with what we think is actually what makes sense, what is logical. And Khamenei doesn't have this, he doesn't share the same fundamental principles. We shouldn't be asking questions of, does he know that Trump is going to strike him? Well, the question we should be asking is, what does he actually want to lead to? Then we can see how that relates to how Trump is behaving and what he's responding to Trump.
Well, let me ask you a question before we jump to what he wants to lead to. And I'm very curious what you have to say on that. What you're saying, I mean, does President Trump understand what you're saying? I mean, does he understand that Khamenei is not working according to Western principles? Because President Trump seems to be, at least in the optics, perhaps in good faith, moving towards a negotiation with Iran. How do you see that?
I think in order to answer that, you need to understand Trump's pattern. Trump has a pattern. I like to think that he does two things when he negotiates. One is a very loud red herring to fog the playing field so that he's in control of the ball. And the other is a game of chicken. Whether you look at 2019 when he had the deal of the century with Kushner, or whether you look at the Gaza deals, or you look at even the Tariff War on Liberation Day, or any other major thing, or Trump waking up and wanting Greenland, and then right after he arrests Maduro, and right before the whole thing with Iran starts to implode again, he wakes up again and says he wants to take Greenland. Whenever Trump is behaving in a way that looks so irrational and makes us ask these questions of, doesn't he know that they think a certain way. Doesn't he know that he can't make deals with someone who he can't trust? If he's doing something that makes no sense in such a way, that should make us think, well, this guy knows power. This guy knows not just business. He knows how to make a deal. He knew how to make North Korea calm down. He knew how to make Iran calm down. He knew how to make basically every military situation that came up in his time as president. He understands geopolitics. He understands power more than everything. So whenever he starts behaving in a way that looks so ridiculous, that's what I mean when he throws a red herring. He'll suddenly say something so absurd, so obnoxious, so out of the blue that it makes his opponents look at that instead of what he's actually doing.
The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit will take place April 15th to 17th at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in Jerusalem. Register today at jnssummit.org and use the coupon code JNSTV, that is JNSTV, one word, to receive 20% off all tickets. I look forward to seeing you in Jerusalem. All right, so take Greenland. Relate Greenland. Is Greenland somehow connected to what's happening in Iran?
I'll preface this with saying not everything is connected by some kind of pre-designed, predetermined, pre-understood concept. I think when Trump goes into a deal, whether he goes the playing chicken route or going the red herring route, Trump wants to win. He knows he'll win. I don't think he knows exactly what he'll win because he's not a prophet. So Trump going in saying that Greenland has to do with Iran is somehow saying he knows how to play the whole game in a pre-designed way.
But well, explain to me though the red herring strategy. Like try to get down to bricks and mortar.
I think
by what you
with
mean.
Greenland,
with Greenland as an example, or choose another one. I'm curious if there's a red herring strategy, how that works amidst Trump's global ambitions.
Well, his global ambitions are Pax Americana. The concept that came from Pax Romana, Pax Britannica, the idea that you're so powerful that you enforce peace because no one can attack you. Trump's doctrine is the very Reagan, Churchill kind of tradition of peace through strength. This idea that I'm so powerful, I'm not trusting that you're going to want to be my friend. I'm just going to be powerful enough that it's worth it for you to stay my friend. And so when he goes for Greenland, for example, how's this a red herring? Do you remember what happened the week before? He announced this last time that he wants to take Greenland.
Was that Maduro?
Exactly. He goes and arrests a narco-terrorist, socialist, communist tyrant,
the head of a major
country who happens to be the hub for cartel control in South America, one of them. It happens to be an avenue where Hezbollah, who is a drug distributor internationally, gets a lot of their money, where China and Iran get their hold in the Americas. And so it's a very strategic enemy for the United States in that sense. Not the Venezuelan people, as Trump said many times, just like not the Iranian people, but the regime. And so he goes and arrests him, and then his wife. And there's a lot of noise because this is unprecedented. It's like it's insane. A few days later, he wakes up and says, I want to take Greenland. Where does everybody's attention shift to?
To Greenland.
Who's talking about Maduro right now?
Right.
That's what I mean. Now, it's not just that. I think Trump hit like 5 birds with this stone because he also ran, what we spoke about in our conversation before, was that Trump ran back from 2015. He was already saying these things before he got elected in 2016, that the United States is being abused. Whether it's NAFTA or NATO or the UN, the United States funds, I think the military expenses for NATO is 2% of your GDP. The United States pays between 3 to 5, and all the rest of the countries pay under 2. The United States funds a majority of the UN peacekeepers. They fund many of the military interests of Europe depend on America, and that's what then they use the money that they have that they don't have to use on military for welfare spending, for all kinds of government spendings internally in Europe. So the United States ends up paying a lot for the world. That was Trump's argument. We're being abused, America's money and taxpayer and our military, and not just that we're not being respected or paid back. They're not appreciating what we're doing. Just like he said in Davos, by the way, just now in the last visit, You don't have to give us Greenland, and we won't fight for it, but we won't forget. And then, of course, he threw in because he's Trump, he just had to throw in if we wouldn't have come in on January 6th, 1944, you'd all be speaking a lot of German and a little bit of Japanese.
Right, of course, that's the Trump ice.
That's the Trump kind of, you got to put a little something in there. But back to, I regress, what we were saying, Trump wants to prove that America, he's very America first. Now, we're not get into the whole conversation of America first versus America only, but Trump is very America first. And he says it because he understands, again, the Reagan doctrine of being, if you want to be the world superpower, you have to take the responsibility of the world superpower. And you have to protect the things that serve American Western interests. And Europe isn't going to do that. They're not only abusing these deals that the United States is involved in, they are also not capable of defending these things. They're not capable, as he told them.
Well, they've been emasculated. They've self-emasculated. For it's been 80 years that the United States protected Europe from the communist onslaught from the Soviet Union. Their armies are, for the most part, with the exception of a few special forces, almost like a fiction. And, that leads us back, though, to the main point of Iran. When you say that he knew, like, we can't assume that Trump doesn't know what's happening.
Right.
So what's the strategy? I want to understand. So that we've got the red herring to distract people's attention. I get it. What's the game of chicken right now with Iran?
We said two strategies, right? We said the red herring, which, again, I just want to close what we were saying before because it was kind of open-ended. What he did with Greenland is both toss the world into a fog of not knowing what's going on with Maduro, or leaving that, and then going into proving that it is America's interest to protect Greenland. And when NATO responded, or threatened to respond, it was with 13 soldiers.
13 soldiers.
What they sent in response to a pending attack from the Americans to take Greenland, was that. And Trump basically showed, without needing to do anything, you can't protect yourselves. It's in your interest that I do this. And then he goes to Davos, and with very tough love, a tough love speech, he tells them that it's in your interest that we're in control. And then they reignite this deal that they had from 1951. But now America has a right to the minerals. And what that makes Greenland for the United States is something that it's worth protecting for American interests, which then protects the northern trade routes, which then protects just the North Atlantic from China, from Russia, from any adversary. So Trump, I don't think he knew what he was going to get, but he knew he was going to win. And so this red herring thing, I think there's a mix.
The red herring actually turned into a profitable negotiation for the United States.
Exactly. And he, again, when you look at every one of these interactions that Trump has internationally, it's when he says something ridiculous or we don't know what he's doing. Think of the 12-Day War. A month before, he went to Qatar, he got a plane, he didn't visit Israel. He had a fight with Bibi in the White House. And the whole world was saying, oh, it's all done. They're not friends.
Right. The optics were that he and Bibi, he and the Prime Minister, which have the closest relationship between two world leaders at present today, and the closest relationship of any Israeli prime minister in history with a U.S. president. But the optics were that he had insulted Bibi, and, basically it was unsuccessful.
And then Bibi on our side says his son is getting married. He wants to take vacation. No one knows what's going on with Iran. And then at 3:30 in the morning, we all wake up to a siren and a message just saying we're about to attack in Iran. And an hour later, there's a tweet from President Donald Trump that says, I gave them 60 days. Today is day 61. So again, he will fog up the field and make everyone lose focus on what's actually going on so that he controls the ball. The issue with chicken, the game chicken, there are many versions. You drive towards each other, towards a cliff, and the first one that quits loses.
Or the typical, just for our viewers, the tractor against the tractor, right?
Yeah.
Two tractors heading down, full speed, one against each other, in between the rows of corn, and who's going to be the one that's going to swerve off at the end.
Right. Trump does that with his handshake. And that's why I think when we spoke about it, that's why maybe you started this conversation with that, is that Trump will pull people in. And it's physically, he'll pull you in when he shakes your hand, and he'll keep going until he feels he's got enough, and then he'll let go. And we saw that, I think the loudest example was the tariff war. Now we can argue it's a different conversation if it was successful, really, if the political aims that he wanted to get by zero for zero trade or lowering actual tariff.
The tariff war against Europe.
The world, basically. He got like, I think the administration claimed that they got 30 countries to get to zero for zero trade, complete free trade.
Zero tariff.
Yes. And then it seems that what he did was he basically showed the world, look what I can do to the market. Look what I can do to the market. Do you like me? Or do you like the ones who are stealing your tech and your intellectual property and you can't trust with their deals and are trying to ruin our economy? Which side are you going to go for? And then when he felt that he made that point enough, then he lets go. And everyone was telling him, back off the ramp. You've made enough. You've won. It's getting dangerous. Investors don't know what's going on. No one knows what to do. And then he lets go. And then things settle down. And then he basically relinquishes tariffs from everyone but China. And again, did he know everything that's going to happen from the start? Did he know exactly how long he was going to pull this, stretch this out for? No. But I think he knows Trump is very good with power because he knows when to let go when he's won enough. So when he plays chicken.
By the way, I just want to add one thing to that. We know that how the world looked at that game of chicken because the S&P 500 just kept going up and up and up and was reaching, all-time highs while they were screaming terror. There's a wolf in the hen house. And at the end of the day, the S&P skyrocketing. Okay, the dollar's a little bit weaker, but the U.S. will probably recover from that. But consumer confidence is very, very high with what Trump's doing.
It's almost as if a strong United States would affect investors for the United States. It's almost as if a strong America means a strong American economy.
Right.
Almost.
So go ahead. Continue the chicken. Now apply the chicken strategy. He's playing chicken with Iran. How does that apply to the negotiations that took place yesterday?
When he came to Israel with Kushner and they wanted to have the deal of the century, there was a very loud conversation here, especially in the Tilumi world, the religious, how would you translate?
Religious Zionist
world, which was saying we're not going to give up any land because the deal basically said Israel will recognize a Palestinian state. And at that point, the religious Zionists, they stopped listening. No, there's no way we can't afford this. We've done this before. We're not going to repeat this mistake. But the rest of the conversation, the rest of the deal was Hamas has to disarm. They have to recognize East Jerusalem. They have to recognize Shiloh. They have to recognize Ali. They have to recognize Hebron. They have to recognize all these things, that it's a one-sided deal.
And Israel was going to be declaring sovereignty. This was the key. Right. Sovereignty over Area C.
Right.
And that was going to take place anyway, with or without the deal, right? That's the key. That's the key. The maps had been, right, I saw the maps. This was an interesting approach that the Israeli government tried moving forward. I think we didn't manage maybe to move forward fast enough, but Israel was going to be declaring sovereignty over Area C.
Right. Again, the point here is one-sided deal. It was obvious, not the PLO nor Hamas, because who are you addressing when you talk about Palestine? They're not going to disarm, either of them. The pay for slay administration of Abbas, they're not going to stop. They're not going to recognize these things. But if Israel comes and says, I'm willing to play ball, just like I did every single time this was on the table, then it gives legitimacy from an American point of view. And I think what Trump is doing is a little bit of that on the American end now, because I don't think he has any doubt in his mind that Khamenei. Do you know what the concept of Hudaybiyah in Islam is?
Tell us.
Hudaybiyah is based on a deal that Muhammad made with the Jew. It's a mix of the tribes in Mecca.
Mostly Jewish tribes.
Mostly Jewish tribes.
That's what's really quoted here in the Quran.
And he turns to the tribes in Mecca who have an alliance with the tribes in Medina. And he tells them that if they don't protect their allies and Muhammad and his army can go and conquer them, then he won't attack those in Mecca. And he goes and does that. He grows to be big enough. And then he turns back to those in Mecca and he attacks them. And then this goes back and he goes to the Jews of Khaybar, and where all the Jews from the region are starting to evacuate to because Muhammad is conquering the land. And he tells them to send emissaries, basically the leaders, the elders of the tribe, in order to come to some kind of understanding. And of course, when they come, while they were promised safe travels in return, they're slaughtered. And so the Jewish tribes are left without leadership, and then it's easier for Muhammad to take over. This concept is that all agreements are temporary. They are all part of the greater goal of Islam. Islam in general, there are the Muslim version of the Jewish halakha, the categorical way of acting your beliefs, has had a law for the Sunnis in Iraq from the pending Shia attack that said that if the Shiites attack, you're allowed to fake being a Shiite in order to not be slaughtered, so that when they're weak, then you can come back and slaughter them yourself. And it's this idea that the end goal, well, how do they say, I don't remember the quote in Arabic, but Allah favors those who have patience. So when we started this conversation, you asked, does Khamenei know what he's doing? Does he not know that Trump is going to destroy him? And on the other hand, does Trump not understand that this guy believes in Hudaybiyah? When Arafat was asked in Johannesburg, why is he working with the Zionists for the Oslo Accords? He answered one word, Hudaybiyah. When Natzil was asked, why is he going to have peace with the Zionists? He said the same word, because the Muslim word understands what the Westerners don't. And so this aspect of the Middle East, when we say we need to speak Arabic in the Middle East, we really need to understand what they mean when they use these kinds of words, and when they try to confuse us by using very friendly Western words when they tell each other Hudaybiyah. Now,
so they're using, the art of illusion, kind of the Hudna art, long-term thinking, where the West is short-term thinking, right? The West has walked into the idea of a Hudna, a ceasefire, right? Time and time again, the Biden administration, Israeli administrations in the past have taken this idea of a Hudna, which is a ceasefire, which they mean temporary. Temporary agreements of eventually we can destroy you. And because they're long-term thinkers, they have an advantage. Because the West is generally short-term thinkers, they walk into this for some preservation of immediate peace sometimes.
Right.
Now you've got them using this art of illusion, and you've got Trump on the other side creating a fog. Where are they going to meet, in your opinion?
So here comes in what Trump, I think, is doing is I started by talking about the deal of the century he had with Kushner. I think what he's doing here is exposing that there's no one to talk to. I think he knows that popularly, Trump, as Ben Shapiro says a lot, Trump is a pragmatist. Trump is very good at reading the tide. He knows to see where things are flowing, and what, you're seeing that with ICE right now in Minnesota, and how they're dealing that he swapped Kristi Noem with Tom Homan. He's doing things very pragmatically because he understands how people are perceiving these things. And he looks at the West right now, and he sees that they do not understand that the Muslims see all the way to Vienna. Muslims think that the entire Balkan all the way to Vienna is Waqf. They don't even understand what that word means. They don't understand that Western dominance over that territory, over what was Islamic territory, is temporary.
Explain. I think for the audience, it's worthwhile explaining the idea of what happens with the Waqf and once conquered,
so
relinquished.
People tend to forget that conquest is one of the most ancient human endeavors. Whenever someone is powerful enough, that's what they do. Everywhere on the globe. It could be the Aztecs in Mexico. It could be the Mongols in Asia. It could be the Arabs crossing across, spanning across northern Africa and the entire Arab Peninsula. And the Muslim understanding of the world is that once a land is conquered in the name of Allah, it is Muslim territory. If they controlled the caliphates of the Barbary states, the Barbary Caliphate or the Ottoman Caliphate or any other, that land is eternally Muslim. it will return to be Muslim.
And that, by the way, is their belief over the land of Israel.
Exactly. Of course. And this goes also for Westerners. If anyone in Europe is listening to this, Vienna, where they tried to conquer twice, that the Ottomans stopped. I don't remember who were the two individuals that had the conversation, but basically the Westerners were proud of fending off the Ottomans, and the Ottomans said, you don't understand. We maybe lost this fight. We're going to come back in 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 years, and we're going to conquer you from within, because Allah favors the patient. So those who are patient or willing to suffer.
So applying this now back to where we are.
Khamenei is a Shiite Muslim. The IRGC, led by the Ayatollahs, who we tend to mix together, are Shiite Muslims. I don't know to speak. There are so many different strands, and we don't really know what's going on within the 90 million Iranians themselves. But they're not Arab. It's a different country. It's a country that was becoming westernized until the revolution of 79. And I think Khamenei, with these Muslim principles, to which they adhere, it's a little hard to assume or to plan where he's leading this. We spoke about Waqf and other thing, but Hudaybiyah
do you think, let me ask you,
yeah.
Rafi, do you think that when he's threatening a U.S. warship, do you think it's a legitimate threat? Meaning, if the U.S. does strike Iran, do you think he's going to go after U.S. assets, which would absolutely end that regime? If he was to sink a battleship, if he was to sink an aircraft carrier, I don't know when an aircraft carrier has ever been sunk, and there's not that many in the whole world, right? The U.S. has maybe 12 aircraft carriers, and it's, I think the largest after that's maybe China with 3 or 4. I mean, they have very few. That would cause the elimination of the regime for sure.
Right.
Why is he making that statement to Trump right now? What's he saying to Trump?
He's trying to play big stick diplomacy. And Trump has the bigger stick. The United States has the bigger stick. We don't even have to get to nuclear arsenal. It's just the United States military. I think we forget sometimes the might of the United States military. You know who has the most planes in the world?
The U.S.?
The U.S. Air Force. Do you know who is second place on having the most planes in the world? The U.S. Navy. This and the United States is spread all over the world. And when they're mobilizing with these aircraft carriers, people may forget that the U.S. when the U.S. will respond to anything like that, it won't just be from those aircraft carriers. And Trump has proven that he is a force to be reckoned with, and you probably shouldn't attempt at it. So I do think it would be the end of the regime. And I think this maybe answer the question on Trump's end. I think Khamenei is more of it's a question that no one can answer. But with Trump, I think he's trying to do the same thing he's done in the past, which is exhaust all other attempts. We tried to sit down with them. They wouldn't talk. We tried to bring them again. They wouldn't talk. We tried to come. They won't give up the nuclear deal. They won't give up threatening us. They won't give up threatening. We can't.
So it's interesting when we talk about the Trump handshake doctrine,
right?
Where he's pulling in, applying pressure, and then he knows when to release. I think there's something, he knows when to give the other side the feeling he's releasing. And when Iran right now, you could see that the foreign minister talks are moving forward. In 2 weeks, we'll get back to you with a plan, right? So it looks like on the optics, on the surface, that Trump is okay. Trump's releasing but this is when Trump actually can pull out Midnight Hammer.
I will remind the audience that this is the same question. The question that we're asking right now of what is Trump doing is reminiscent of the question we asked in the weeks leading up to June 12th. And we all thought we were the wiser. We all thought that, I won't speak for everyone. I'll say that many voices were saying that Trump he's lost his allyship with Israel, and Israel doesn't have on who to depend. And we just don't know where to turn, and we don't know what to expect from Trump. And then, as I said in the beginning of our conversation, I gave them 60 days. Today is 61. So I think there isn't a word for it in English, but davka, especially. It's not really, it doesn't translate right, but that moment where those questions, where Trump starts, his behavior is so irrational, whether he's playing chicken, whether he's playing a red herring, whatever it is, when it doesn't make sense at all, maybe we should patience. He's proven himself time and time and time and time again. Every single time. Again, I don't think he knows what he's going to get at the end of the day. I think he wants to win, and when he feels he's won enough, he lets go. And I think right now, he is pulling the Iranians, he's stretching them far enough that when he feels he has, whether it's the legitimacy within the American legislative, whether it's the American people, whether it's the West, I don't know. When he feels that he's shown, I've exhausted all of their options, then we'll have a day 61 again.
Mm-hmm. My question is, now I want us to narrow down. I'm very curious for your take. What does this mean for Israel? This post-alliance restructuring, what does it mean for Israel? Are we going to be 100% allied with the U.S. at a time in which you and I've talked about this in great detail, and my audience knows that one of the most important things, and for me at the very least, is the recalibration of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And I feel like that is an existential threat. I feel like the only person that can really do this in Israel is Prime Minister Netanyahu. He is the one that is absolutely understands America, is grateful to America, and at the same time understands where Israel needs to be. But at the same time, when you're restructuring reliance on the United States, you also want to have other entities that you can bring into your orbit. What does this mean for Israel and Israel's need to have growing independence?
First is the legitimacy of, I don't want to say globalist, but international kind of orders. The second is the difference between those on the Western side and those opposing the West. The third point is, how does that affect Israel in general? And then I think the last point that you brought it to is, how should we view this detachment from the United States and in a sense of more independence and more of an allyship rather than dependence? So I'll try to,
in light of not having anyone else to turn to.
Right. The fundamental principles of the West that come from our traditions, that come from our religious texts, that come from the experience of thousands of years, that come from everything we've gone through to develop them, things that many take for granted today, are not rational principles. That's why also, as Jews, there's a statement that's kind of strange where Moses says, choose the good in the life and not the evil and death. And it's, well, isn't that a rational decision? And I would recommend that people look around us, all the enemy civilizations of the West. No, it's not a rational decision. If it was rational decisions, all human beings.
Yeah, this is the playbook.
Conclusion.
This is the playbook.
Exactly.
For them.
So we need to understand that our very special ideas, our very good ideas that make the West so unique, so powerful, are things that we need to defend with force, because there are those who want to take it away, and there are those who don't accept it. There are those who see us as kuffar. There are those who see us as enemies to their dominance of what they call the 100-year marathon in China. There are those who see us as adversaries in any sense. And so these concepts of NATO, of the UN, of the EU, on our side, on the Western side, need to understand that they need to be enforced. These ideas, these concepts that make Western values and enforce them and protect them need to be enforced by force. So I think the bluff isn't that NATO isn't a good idea, isn't that it didn't protect the West from communist overreach or invasion or any other thing that they could do. It is that it needs to be reignited, and they need to understand that they need to take their toll, which is what Trump is saying. You need to enforce peace with strength, not with good wishes, not with utopian diplomacy. That's the first thing. The second thing is with the Brinks, it's kind of like what Tucker Carlson said regarding the fact that they're going to unite and they're going to destroy the West and they're all going to attack. This is, first of all, an economic
Explain
alliance.
Brinks again.
Brinks is an economic alliance between India, China, I think even Brazil, South Africa. They're different, not South Africa. I don't remember all the members of the Brinks, but it's an economic alliance. they are not going to defend each other in a case of a war. They're not friends. They're enemies of an enemy, which if you go into strategic theory, you could say that maybe that could be used in some point, but it's not worth it for Iran to sacrifice everything they have for Brazil. It's not something it's what Tucker Carlson, again, I mention him because he warned against people like Mark Levine that we're going to send tens of thousands of troops again, and it's going to be Iraq 2.0. The bluff isn't just that we need to understand that you need to enforce the doctrines we believe in on the Western side. It's also to recognize the weakness of the alliances on the opposing side. China, Iran, Russia just proved for the past 2 years that what Osama bin Laden called the states paper tiger. China copies everything they get, and Iran, again, we proved within a day. Within a day, we controlled them for 12 days. Within 12 days, we destroyed Fordo. Those are two very different statements. And it shows that the West still has the power. The West still has, if we just choose to, we have the power.
So the bluff isn't that NATO doesn't have the power. It's that NATO has not been willing to use that power to achieve its goal.
By the way, that's what Marco Rubio just said in the Munich summit. Sorry, in the Munich summit, that he basically said we share a history, a past, a root, and we also share a destiny. But this friendship, this alliance is a competence alliance. This is something that you need to be able to defend yourself, not to depend on me. We have things to defend and we should want to defend them, but it's not that the United States is going to do all the work for the rest of the world. So it's recognizing that countries need to defend themselves, but that there is something to share with other countries in the West, but they have to choose to do it.
Okay. Are you saying, though, you do not think there's going to be a reordering of alliances in the world, or the idea of calling out all these alliances and kind of stripping them bare? The EU, again, their trade power. Trump walked in and realigned most of Europe with trade power. Like you said, NATO sent 8 troops or 13 troops to Greenland. With the erosion or the realignment of all of this, how does this, again, I want to drive home, what is this going to look like for Israel? Is it going to be fully dependent on and only with the U.S., which is a very different prospect, not under Trump and not under a Republican administration, but perhaps under a unfriendly future administration?
Again, those are two questions. The bluff.
All right, take them down and
yeah, the bluff aspect. We have to separate alliances from, like, the EU isn't just an alliance, it's a union. It's like saying that that the United States, Canada, and Mexico share some kind of inherent relationship, and so they should have one governing body. It's not to say that they're a North American alliance and they should probably defend themselves. Having an alliance isn't like being part of a government structure. And so I do think that globalist things prove themselves wrong. That's why Brexit happened. That's why people need to respect their institutions, and they need to have their relationship with their country and not with some higher body that doesn't have to do with anything. I think that is a bluff. I think that is proving globalism over the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st is proving that it's not something that people adhere to. But alliances amongst the West are things that need to be strengthened, but it needs to come from every side. And that leads to Israel. I think one of the conversations, for example, that's happening with the American right regarding Israel, the Groyper movement, the woke right, what they're arguing is that Israel is eating from America's golden table, and it is enjoying the fruits of America's labor with organizations like AIPAC that are funded, and they shape American policy to defend Israel. What they don't understand, and of course they point to the $3.8 billion that we get, that Israel gets from the United States as a credit service. The reason I say that is because it's important to reiterate that the money that Israel gets for the United States is money that goes back into the U.S. economy, that it buys American product, that it has contracts with the United States, that it has to spend the American money within the United States. which not only creates jobs and sells their product, etc., but and then we test their gear. We share intelligence, and we hold American Western interests in a very hostile neighborhood, which is called the Middle East. America and Israel are allies. And Israel, I think both sides, we need to understand that there is something not just utilitarian that we serve, which is American, Israeli, Western dominance in the world, this hegemony, regional or world, and a world stage like the United States. It's that there is something that we share in common. There are values that make us who we are that we need to defend, and that relationship should be held in a way of an alliance and not dependency.
I like what you're saying. It's the realignment of the U.S.-Israel relationship it's not that Israel, that the lack of other, perhaps, strength of other alliances around the world will cause Israel to kind of be stranded. We need to realign the Israel-U.S. relationship beyond utilitarian goals and more into the shared moral values that we share between these two nations. Is this what you're saying?
I'll clarify. I said that there are two aspects that need to be remembered. We can't forget the values that we share with the United States, which make us, which have that sense of relationship that we need to protect. It's more than that. We need to shift our dependency, which is what Bibi spoke about over a span of 10 years. We're supposed to completely be off the American support. I think Israelis who understand the picture that we're having a credit system where we give way more than we're paid for with that 3.8 billion, we should have a fair relationship. We don't need to question every single move we make before we make it because we have strings attached. And the United States should respect that like Israel respects it with the United States. My point is, like we differentiated before with NATO and the EU, we are allies. We're not dependent on the United States. And it forwards American interest. Israel being able to pursue its interests forwards American interests. And if the relationship turns over the years less from dependent to an allyship where we sell each other the goods that we have and we trade the information that we have and we better each other's tech and we do everything that we're doing now, but that the concept is relationship, not dependency, will strengthen that alliance and will also strengthen Israeli sovereignty in this region, which by default pushes Western values and dominance in the Middle East. And that's the relationship that Israel needs to have with the United States and vice versa.
I want to take us one step further, and with this we're going to wrap, which is, let's take this current relationship, which is the best relationship we've seen, again, I think, between certainly an Israeli premier and a United States president, between Bibi and Trump. If Trump releases that handshake and feels he gets a decent deal and walks away, which I've been arguing against, I find it to be, a very low probability that he'll do this. If he walks away with a deal that's better than the Obama deal, meaning
everything's better than the Obama,
everything, that it doesn't take much, but it needs to stop enrichment. It means the key will be their ballistic missile program, which Rubio himself is openly spoken about and acknowledges that this existential, and that they're supposedly not going to grow their proxy regime with Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the ring around Israel. Let's just say that if Trump was to walk away and he was to leave that intact and say, okay, I got to win, which may carry through to the end of his presidency, where does this leave Israel? Trump walks away. If he makes a deal with Iran, and we know that they're going to, and Israeli intelligence shows that they're continuing enriching, sees that they're moving forward with the proxy program, sees that they're still building ballistic missiles, which is conceivable that we would release that.
We had that in 1983.
Okay, and so what did we do?
When it bombed the facilities
in Iraq.
Correct. Right. Similar threat from someone who we don't know if we're going to be able to attack or not, if we can depend on our allies to do it for us. The scene from The Godfather with that Vito is christening his niece or something, and while he's denouncing Satan, every one of his enemies is taken out while he's having this scene. That is exactly what I was thinking about when Bibi went up to the UN and gave his speech while he gave the green light to go and take out Nasrallah a minute before. It's better to apologize than to ask for permission. We, as much as Westerners who don't live here and don't understand the fact that we wake up to sirens, that we have to think twice. Sorry. We have to conceal carry. We have to be prepared for the fact that our mixed cities with our lovely neighbors might turn on us like they did in 2021. They might turn on us like they did in 1929 or 1935 or in 1948 or 1963, 67, 1973. We can't count on our neighbors' lack of ambition. And our lack of ambition won't lead to theirs. So we need to be prepared for our enemies to strike. And that means peace through strength. That means that if we see the threat, we need to attack. And with Iran, I also think the main point for this conversation is the eerie sense of what the heck is Trump doing right now is the same feeling we had in the days leading up to June 12th. And so I don't think that that's going to be the case, that he's going to back off. I think the tens of thousands that were massacred by the Iranian regime is something that he can't ignore. And Trump is the FAFO president. And they FA'd. So they're going to find out, I believe. We don't know the future, but it doesn't make sense that Trump is suddenly going to change everything. If the crazy scenario where Trump does not respond after all of this, Israel needs to do what it's always done best, which is take care of its own.
I want to summarize by saying, if Tehran mistakes that handshake for weakness, most likely they're going to be very, very surprised.
God willing.
God willing. Thank you, Rafi, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to having you back on. And to our audience, this is a deep insight into the events that are shaping the world today. This is happening day by day. There's news happening. I'm sure by our next podcast, the Middle East is going to look a little bit different than it looks right now.